Welcome back to another recording of the Elevate Media Podcast. I am Chris Anderson, your host, and today we're going to dive into a topic which has been on my mind and will probably happen in the future, and that is writing a book. And writing a book can seem daunting and overwhelming and very time consuming, but we're going to talk to an expert today about how to get it done and maybe some ways that we can do it in a quicker fashion and still be successful. So, today I've got Mike Olmer on the show today. Mike, welcome to the Elevate Media Podcast.
Chris, thank you for having me. It's a treat to be down there in Indiana.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to have you on. Definitely looking forward to, picking your brain and asking some questions around becoming an author and what's that like? Because you've authored multiple books. Is that correct?
Yes, I guess I'm
Yeah.
coming up on 20
To say just a few.
that I've either written myself. Most of them I've written myself. Some I've written with other people. And a couple of them towards the end, I've sort of worked with them with clients of ours. So I say 20, but, it could be more, it could be less. After a while, it seems a little ungracious to count.
Right. But that's fantastic. Some people, never write one. And, it's always on their bucket list, kind of like what I mentioned earlier. But so what got you into being an author? I know you've had an extensive career, as an interviewer, as a writer for sports. So
Yeah.
what is that kind of the transition that got you into actually being an author of books?
Sort of, and I'm embarrassed to tell this story because being an author is something a lot of people aspire to, right? And they
Mhm.
say, well, how did you get this? And I say, I'm always embarrassed because basically just someone came to me and asked me to do it. And so I didn't have to hunt for an agent and I didn't have to do all that stuff. Someone was looking for a book done. And at the time I was working for a publication called the Hockey News. And they wanted a hockey book and they called the editor of the Hockey News and they said, we need a book. And you got anybody? And they referred them to me. And that was my first book. And then one kind of, yeah, as they say, one thing sort of led to another. But I always had access to interesting people because of my journalism, because I was
Mhm.
journalism at the same time. So I'd be writing, books for kids and books for hockey, but also journalism and other endeavors. So after a while, you get enough interviews, you kind of almost do it by habit. But writing a book is, a guy said to me one time, when I was just writing my first book, he said, you're going to be walking down the street and you're going to look over and you're going to see there's like a person reading a book on a bus. And you're going to find yourself jumping up and down to see if they're reading your book. It's that much fun. And it
Yeah.
really is. It's the greatest experience. I tell people that the experience of writing the book is what you're paying me for. I'll throw the book in for free.
Yeah.
Because the clarity and the stuff that comes with writing the book is remarkable.
Yeah. And with that, like, did you have any, someone obviously, like you said, someone came to you and said, "Hey, write this book, or you need to write this book." Did you have any, drag your feet moments, any moments of like, do I really need it? Like, should I do this? Or is anyone ever actually going to read this? Like the normal kind of limiting beliefs a lot of people have before they write a book. Did you have any of that?
No, I didn't because I was
Okay.
writing about somebody else because I was
Okay.
writing about players for the Toronto Maple Leafs, so I knew people would read it. But a little while later, the same publisher came to us and they said, came to me and they said, we'd like you to do a book on Canada. It'd be an alphabet book, and it was more like what you're talking about. There really
Mm.
wasn't any guaranteed return from it. And they said, do an alphabet book on Canada. And I said, no, I don't want to. And they came back and they said, come on, do it now. No, I don't want to do that. So they said, come on down to our headquarters. It was in Chelsea, Michigan, where Jeff Daniels is from.
Mm.
I came down there and they gave me lunch. And when you give me lunch, I'm a lot more amenable. So they decided to do the book. That book was the smartest thing I ever did because it sold like 160,000 copies. And it's
Wow.
in every elementary school, every library here in Canada. It's called M is for Maple. And people, when they have when you have a family, Canadian family overseas or somewhere living in the U.S. or you're living in a different country, they ask me to sign it and we send it to them. And it's just been the greatest thing. My kids will always go into a library where they know that they can find a book of their dad's. And I was going to turn that down.
That's really cool. That
Yeah.
is a neat thing. Now I'm curious with it, and obviously you don't have to divulge any of this information, but when you do something like that, obviously it's not a book about you specifically as a person. It's not about your business specifically. Do you have some sort of residuals that come from books like that
Yeah.
that you get?
When it's always it's 20 years later, every couple of times a year, they drop a little coin in my purse and
Okay.
it's lovely. But it's funny because that's really a great question because every book that you do is really about you.
Okay. Yeah.
Even if you're writing about somebody else, you're writing about you because you're the prism that that story is
Mm.
is flowing towards your understanding of the subject and your worldview, it's impossible to not write a book about you, even when you're writing a book about somebody or something else. That's why writing a book, that's one of the great things about it, is that you have to imbue it with your sensibilities, your understandings, your conclusions. And when you do that, you go, oh, I never saw that. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So even if you're doing a book on real estate, right? You're doing really a book about something that you're obviously you're interested in, but you're reaching new conclusions about the subject all the time. So if you can imagine taking that process and then doing it for yourself and your own career and your own life, if you could write a book just about real estate, never having done real estate, imagine what you can do when you're writing a book about real estate, having always been a real estate guy.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, because we definitely bring our own, perspectives and thought processes within that, even if it's not about us directly. So that's a great thought. And with it, a lot of people that listen to the show are trying to build, their business, their brand online with book writing. And I've wondered this, and I'm assuming that there's a place and time to write one kind of about your journey, about the path you've come through. You want to wait on something like that, right? To once you've reached a certain level of quote unquote success to be able to have more, I guess, weight
Well,
behind it, or
Chris, I don't know that I'd say that.
okay,
I think that I think every book has three real essential components.
okay,
And yeah, I don't know that you can write a book about real estate when you're still in high school, right? I get what you're saying. You have to have a little experience, but the first thing you write is three. I think if you look at every great business book, if you look at the 4 Hour Work Week is a great example.
hmm
So the 4 Hour Work Week has a great, what I call a proposition. It's generally the name of the book, or it's a line about the book. And the 4 Hour Work Week says, why are you working 60 hours and hating your job? Why not work 4 hours, do it differently, and love it? Now, who could not want to read that? I mean,
right,
everyone would want to read that. That's a proposition. And
mm,
and every book has a different proposition. The latest book out is called Quit. Really great, really a big bestseller in business. It asks this question. It says, and I'll ask you, Chris, what's the goal of a summiteer? What's the goal? What are you trying to do?
of a what? I didn't hear you.
You're a summiteer, right? You climb
Yep.
summits.
Okay.
That's your thing. So when you approach a summit, what are you trying to do?
Trying to get to the top and see what's out there.
No, man, you're trying to get back home to the bottom after you.
Okay. Yeah.
And if you have to pick between the two, you want to pick getting home.
Yep.
And so that book, really smart book, looks at the idea that sometimes quitting is the right thing to do,
Mm,
right? If there's lots of bodies are strewn on many a mountain with people who had a schedule to decide to junk it and then put getting to the summit ahead of getting back home.
mm.
Great proposition, right?
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
great thought. So if you're going to write that book, okay. The second thing is you don't have to be a summiteer to write the book. You just have to sort of know a little bit of experience and about how the world works. But in your case, you have to have a background that led you to that conclusion.
Mhm.
So let's say you weren't a summiteer, but you had a career in business and you stuck with a lot of jobs where you shouldn't have. And you stuck with a lot of relationships when you shouldn't have. And all you did was you were really narrowly focused on that goal. But then you realize that's not working for you. Sometimes you have to pivot. Sometimes you have to make a different move.
Yep.
And you did this and you changed a marriage. You did this and you learned and you had mentors and you came to this conclusion about quitting. Sometimes quitting is the right thing to do. Okay, that's your backstory. When
Mm.
the reader reads that, they know that you've walked miles to sort of get to that conclusion, right? They have confidence in your conclusion because of your backstory. If you had a backstory that was completely disassociated from that conclusion, it wouldn't have any relevance. But if you have a proposition, a great backstory, and the third thing you need is advice. If
Mm.
people are coming to you and they're reading your book, they want to know stuff. So give them tips and hacks and ideas and stuff like that, and just fill up their basket with advice. Good advice. Those are the three elements of a business book. Anyone
Okay.
can write them, but that blueprint, if you look at any business book, from How to Win Friends and Influence People to 50 Time Management for Mortals to all sorts of different books, they all follow that same proposition. So anyone can do them, and they're fantastic to do.
Yeah. And that's a great point, because I wonder with like the structure of writing a book, I've heard like you have the hook and then you have like, and I'm gonna get this wrong because I haven't done this, but you have the hook, you get them, that's a proposition, and then it builds on itself and you have the kind of the climax and then it kind of lets down to the conclusion. Is that kind of the same pathway you're talking about?
Very much. Yeah.
Okay.
It's you start with the conclusion
Mm,
because you have to sort of engage the reader pretty quickly on. As soon as you get the conclusion, then you slide into the backstory and you
okay.
start talking about how you got there. And then you kind of slide into the tips. It's not like it's like 10,000 words proposition, 10,000 words backstory, 10,000 word tips. They sort of enmesh with each other, but that's certainly the formula because that's what people are looking for.
Yeah.
They need to, they, you know, people often write stories, books, and think the story that the reader's interested in their story. The reader doesn't care about your story, Chris. They
Right.
couldn't care less about the story.
Right.
Mom wouldn't read a book about me, right?
Right.
No one cares about your story. Everyone cares about your conclusions,
Yeah.
right? That's what you want to hear. Your
Mm.
conclusions. If you hear someone talking about a great stock tip as you're walking by, you kind of
Yep.
it might tilt your ear a little bit to hear that. We value other people's conclusions, and so to do that, you give the conclusion first, and then you give the story that validates the conclusion. Does that make
Gotcha.
sense?
Yeah, definitely makes sense. And it because people really just care about themselves and how can they get something from it, basically. So
Oh, we're all the same, right?
yeah.
We're, that's how we're. I'm sure this joke has been told in Kokomo and parts abroad, but you know it's the one about the two hunters and they come around a corner and there's a great big bear there and the bear rears up and the one guy says, "What do we do?" And the other guy says, "Well, we run." The first guy says, "Well, you can't outrun a bear."
I don't have to run. I don't have to run the bear, just you.
Just you. So we're built for that. That's how it
Yeah,
works.
that's good. So if people are trying, okay, so they've got the framework of understanding like how maybe they should structure writing the book. How can they overcome some hurdles and actually start?
Yeah,
Because it can seem daunting, like, oh, I'm gonna open this Google Doc or this Word document, blank canvas, and just start writing. Yeah, okay. Like, how can people overcome those kind of things?
well, I guess one of the things, and this is kind of immodest, but they could come to
Mm.
me because,
Mhm.
and I guess I'll make the plug here. That's kind of what I do. I sit
Yeah.
with people and we work together and we find that those three things, what the proposition is, what your story is, and what you bring to the party in terms of advice. And then we really work on giving you a blueprint. And then the thing that we do to sort of now you have stuff, right? And then we'll give you the transcripts to your conversation. So now you're not looking at an empty page because that's really smart, Chris.
Yeah.
That is really, really daunting. That's the
Yeah.
tip of madness right there.
Yeah. Right.
Doing that. But with that, then they can get started. And we do it in 100 days. You can write 200
Mm.
words a day and have a 20,000 word book.
Hmm.
And you don't need anything more than 20,000 words to have a great book because 95% of the part of having a book is having a book.
Right.
5% is what's inside it. And
Mm.
that's really, really essential because you owe that to yourself and to the reader to make a great book.
Yeah.
But 95% of the impact of the book is not through its content, but through its existence.
Hmm.
The fact that you are confident enough and feel entitled enough to write about a subject tells the reader something. There's nobody else in your sector that's written a book because it's hard.
Right.
Right? And no one's done it. So when you're the only person telling the story, yours is the only story that counts. And when and in terms of your social media, it's a north star for your social media. You just come back to that proposition. You're that guy. You're that guy. I was
Mm.
talking to a potential client the other day, and he's in a situation where he's in a category completely dominated by another piece of software, right? We used to say he was Avis to Hertz number two. Like he's the number two guy, and he's never going to catch up where that other software is, and that's the way things are.
Mhm.
So Coke started like 115 years ago. Pepsi started 108 years ago. Pepsi's never caught up.
Right. Yeah.
100 years later, they've never caught up. So okay, so we're talking about that, and he has his software has great utility, but he's looking for a subject to do on a podcast on. And we sort of kicked it around. And he's got an interesting story, very interesting guy. So he said, "What about podcasts for all the people who know they're never going to win the Super Bowl, right? They're never going to dominate that category, but if they move their market share up from 5 to 12%, they're going to have a retirement
Yeah.
they wouldn't have otherwise had, right?"
Yeah.
That's a really compelling story. What are you going to do how do you behave? What do you do? How do you grow when you're not going to win the Super Bowl?
Mm. The
Right?
runners up. The
Who are
runner-ups.
you? Right, except that if you get to retire or you
Yeah.
come from the summit, you're not the runner-up, you're the
Right.
winner.
Yeah. That's true. That's good.
So, yeah, so that's kind of the gig. It's that finding those three things. And so, but to your point, I think the best way to do it is go at it. I give myself. We all work better to deadlines. So
Mhm.
I give you 100 days, and what
Yeah.
I say is we're gonna work it all out. We're gonna figure it all out. I'm gonna give you this blueprint, and I'm gonna give you every word you gave me. So you're entering this with a map. You know where you want to go. You know where you want to get to. Here's what a couple of potential covers could look like. Here's 100 days. Call me whenever you want me. Whenever you want to talk to me, I'm not gonna write it, but whenever you want to talk to me, and we'll go over your story so much, you'll be so sick of me. You'll be praying for that 100 days to come, just so you don't have to talk to me. But we'll get it done. We'll find your stories and we'll do it in 100 days. That's 200 days. Like a laundry list is 100 words, right? A
Yeah.
grocery list is 100 words. You can do 200 words a day.
Yeah.
Do it for 100 days, and that's 20,000 words. We can do that.
And with that, do you go self-editing, or do you guys have editing or editors with you? Or, because, a lot of people, at least from where I sit, the big thing is Amazon bestseller. It's
Yeah.
New York Times bestseller. Those lists, like, are those things
No.
still prevalent? Do they even matter anymore? Or is it just kind of a pay to play type of platform now to get on those lists? Or what is your perspective on those?
I think they're false. I
Hmm.
don't
Okay.
when I see bestseller, I'm automatically dubious because it's you get all your friends to first you choose a really obscure category, and then you get all your friends to buy it, or pre-order it, and you get a ranking based on that. If you look online, you've seen this as well as I have, Chris. There's lots of people who tell you you're going to have an Amazon bestseller as long as you market it with them. I don't worry about that shit at all. Just
Yeah.
write a book. Just
Yep.
write a good book, and it'll take care of itself because it'll spread by word of mouth. No one buys or doesn't buy a book based on Amazon bestseller status.
Yeah.
And I think as we get more sophisticated and really understand what's being done here, it's just a manipulation of the algorithm. I don't find it particularly honorable. I know people do
Mhm.
it, but it's not something that I would recommend people do. Write a
Not
good book.
not focus on, but if it comes naturally through just having a great book,
Yeah,
fantastic.
that's it. That's in that case, shout it from the mountaintops.
Yeah.
Write a great book. Don't worry about the marketing. But you made a great point about the editing. So
Hmm.
where I come in price wise, and I'm going back into the sell thing part of it is that ours is like $6,000.
Okay.
We can't edit your book for that. But if you want
Right.
to find editors, we can you direct you to them. Or there's Fiverr, there's Freelancer, there's different services that'll give that for you. So we either have a recommended one but it's really the price point that the client's interested in. If
Mhm.
they want to, they want to edit themselves. That's the one thing, though. I would say two things I would also add, Chris, is hey, let me give you an example.
Yeah.
I talk to a lot of kids because Emma's from Maple, and one of the things I do is I do this. Hang on, okay? And I ask the kids if I get a bald spot, and the kids say yeah, and I say, come on, man, if I get a bald spot, and the kids say yeah, I say quit kidding around. If I get a bald spot by now, the kids are yelling, they're going yeah. And then I turn to them and I say, well, that's funny because when I brush my teeth, I don't see a bald spot. We can't look at our own work and not see what you don't know, right?
Right.
And so you're going to make mistakes because you spelled a word the way you thought it was spelled, but it's not spelled that way.
Mhm.
And spell check's going to catch it. Sometimes it will, and sometimes it won't. You really, really, really need someone who can copy edit for you and really, because every time you make a mistake, you lower your eyes and credibility in the eyes of the reader, and that's really hard because if they see three mistakes, man, but three mistakes, there's 50, 100 facts on a page. Everything from how you spell it, Canadian to
Yeah.
Australian spelling or whatever, to measurements, distance measurements, to a state where something happened, where something didn't happen. Maybe it was a Tuesday instead of a Wednesday. Maybe you should have the verb is kind of slightly incorrect for this. That's not the perfect verb. There's 100 ways on one page that you can mess up, and
Mhm.
if you find 99 of them, you still got 200 mistakes in your book. That's hard. That's
Yeah.
really hard, and that's why you have to have the person who's not looking at this, although there's not a whole lot there, but who still sees that, who still knows what you don't know and can help you over that. That's
Mm.
really important. What
That's
I
a good
do is
point.
give you the big ideas, and we move all that stuff and figure out your base story. The other thing, Chris, now that I'm blathering, The other thing I guess is that's so great of it is that if you and I talk and we talk about you folks and we talk about where you grew up and your experiences and you know who the important people you were, or maybe you know something in your career that nobody else knows, something about your business that nobody else knows. That's super important. So this is kind of, if I may, this is an
Yeah.
example that
Hmm.
sometimes, let's say you're doing a book, let's say you're an estate planner in the US, and time after time, no one loves paying taxes, right?
Right.
So time after time after time, you come in and you get a client who's bent and bound not to pay an inheritance tax, and they'll move properties around. They'll have different beneficiaries. They'll say, "Yeah, tell them, give them this," but then tell them after I'm dead, they'll bring it back, and they'll make an unholy mess of their estate and destroy the family that they're supposed to be trying to help and protect and promote,
Hmm.
just in the name of not paying inheritance taxes, because no one likes paying inheritance taxes, right?
Right.
Give me, Chris, give me just I know this is a question out of the cold, but just give me a percentage of times out of 100 that you think somebody has to pay an inheritance tax. Like, let's say you have 100 deaths. How many of those have to pay inheritance tax?
I'm gonna go with 75.
0.5.
Oh, that's way off.
Because we all think we're being taxed, right?
Yeah.
It's 0.05, less than 1%
Huh.
of it. And you can look that's an IRS number. You can look it
Okay.
up.
Uh-huh.
So really what people do time after time after time, they're destroying their families for a tax they're never going to have to pay.
Hmm.
They wouldn't have had to pay anyway. Well, if you're an estate planner and you write a book about that, right? Don't destroy your family over a tax you're never going to have to pay. You can build your book all around that one fact. And then you talk
Yeah.
about, had people after people after people in my office. They want to, do all these crazy things. I can't talk them out of it. This family got ruined. That family got ruined. That mom's not talking to that daughter. If you have that one super powerful piece of truth, then you kind of owe it to people to share it with them.
True. And that's kind of like what I do with, talk to people about podcasting. I'm like, you have a story, you have an expertise, you have experiences to share, and holding that inside. If you're not putting it out through your podcast, through being interviewed, like someone is missing out on that information that could help them on their journey. And
I
so
still,
they're,
still agree
yeah.
with you.
So it's super important. Like if you have something to share it in some way, with that too, talking about the editing and you having people like yourself help people write the book, edit the book. What is your opinion? Because this just popped in my head
Yeah.
of ghostwriters
Oh,
with
I think
books.
we're sort of ghostwriters. I'm sort of a ghostwriter because we can do that, and we
Okay.
have done that for people. A ghostwriter is a little different in that a ghostwriter, you say, I'm going to hire Chris and come back in 3 months with the book, Chris. And I
Yeah.
might ask you this or that, or we might have an afternoon together. If I'm, I guess if a ghostwriter is someone who performs the book without putting their byline on, and there's just nothing wrong with that. The person wants, it's their ideas, and if they're willing to pay for it, that's absolutely fine.
Hmm.
I think though the problem with ghostwriters is they just sort of go to the internet and they go, "Here's your book." If
Yeah.
I'm going to ghostwrite your book, you're going to hate me
Yeah.
because I'm going to want to get it right, right?
Hmm.
And I'm going to come back to you a lot of times. Now, it doesn't mean that it's a big hunk of time. I ghostwrited it. I did a book with a great entrepreneur named Ron Foxcroft, and he invented those. If you go to your nephew's sporting events, he admitted to whistle that's really, really, really high and really, really, really shrill. He has a great story, great guy, and he
Huh.
invented. And he gave me about 8 hours. But you talk to someone over 15-minute increments, or 40 minutes, the odd 1 hour increment. 8 hours is a lot of time to spend with me.
Yeah. Right.
So the good side is you get a book with only 8 hours talking to someone like me. The bad side is you still have to spend the 8 hours talking to someone like me.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Like, I guess if you're looking for a ghostwriter, like seeing how their process goes, like, are they going to actually dive in more and spend more time to get that, or are they just going to say, "Oh, these are 3 points, okay, boom," and kind of go? I think that would kind of separate, maybe depending on the book you want, a good ghostwriter from just one who's trying to write.
Well, I mean, AI is going to have a profound impact on that, don't you think, in terms
Yeah,
of ghostwriting? Because now it can take all that information and form it in some fairly coherent manner, and for some people that'll be enough.
yeah, it's true. It's going to be an interesting thing how AI it's already shifted things, but how it continues to, especially in the writing industry. But I still find, I think AI's got a little a little ways to go to make it sound human. Have that, because we've tested AI with like outlines or like scripts for solo episodes or things like that, and it just like they're just things that just doesn't make sense. It can't get your personality. It can't
I
get
totally.
your things like that. Yeah. So, but it definitely is an interesting thing for sure. But
I'm with you. I think it's a great tool, but I don't
mhm,
see it. But of course, someone said something to me that was very disquieting. They said there's no history and there's no, precedent of something that's smarter than something still being willing to work for that thing, even though it knows it's smarter
yeah.
than that thing is, which is kind of eerie and kind of scary.
Mhm,
But no, I see it as you do. I think it gives vast promise for stuff like
yeah.
social media stuff. But so much of that stuff is just repetition, right? It's
Mhm,
just you want to get your face in front of the client. You have 5 key talking points. If you can produce 30 pieces of content, that's great.
yeah.
But it's your content. It's yours. It's your sensibilities, Chris. It's who you are.
Yeah.
What you believe in. It's that thing that it can't manufacture that sensibility. You have to imbue the whole thing, the whole process with that.
Yeah. And it's a definitely, and it's gonna continue to grow. And we're gonna see a lot of things. Like I watched a video with um Zuckerberg showing his new VR. It was crazy. Obviously, they spent time having it scan themselves and like, but it was a whole VR thing. It looked just like him. And now,
Yeah.
Tom Hanks is coming out, and another actor's coming out saying this AI deep fake stuffs. Like people are doing ads with their likeness and their voice, and it wasn't them. And people think it's actually Tom Hanks on the video. He's like, "This is not me. Like this is wrong." And we're gonna get in a lot of, I know Canada, they're trying to put some more censorship on things on social media and with podcasts. Trudeau, I know, is pushing some stuff there. It's just going to be an interesting with everything going on. Um,
I hadn't heard that. What's he doing?
yeah, is some sort of bill he's trying to pass. I just saw on Valuetainment, Patrick Bet David's show.
Hmm.
They shared it about him trying to pass something that's going to, unless you're like a certain creator, social media, they want to uh, hinder freedom of speech more is strong, but it was an interesting article about what he's trying to pass with that. And I mean, U.S. Stuff's here weird within that space too, so it's an interesting. And then with AI coming, like, how do we manage all this deep fake and
I think
things?
I think what's happening here is that the issue is news content, and the problem is that local news providers weren't like our newspaper was just getting decimated up here. So I don't know if it was framed around a freedom of speech question so much as they were getting Facebook was getting a lot of news that they could post on their social media and people use it as a news feed that they weren't
Mm,
paying, right? They just weren't. They would just scoop up whatever they wanted.
mm-hmm.
So what's happened is it's driven independent news producers like small newspapers out of business. Like we
Yeah.
just lost 600 people in this area in terms of the journalism trade. So it wasn't sort of this kind of dark, my understanding at least, a sort of dark force of crushing dissent or
Mm,
eliminating freedom of speech so much as this idea that these people have to get paid if they're doing this work.
mm.
It's almost too little too late because now the people that are doing the work are out of business.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting dynamic with what we
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it'll be interesting. But kind of to get off, and I brought us down that rabbit hole. That was my fault.
Yeah,
But
no problem.
one last thing I did want to ask about writing a book. So you've laid out a great structure. You've given great actionable tips that people can start now.
Yeah.
Obviously, reaching out to people like you to get help if they need it. Once that book is written, do you have tips or industry secrets that allow people to market that out in a more positive way, in a wider way? Do you have a good structure for marketing a book?
No.
No secrets here. No
No
secrets are coming. No,
secrets.
just
I
kidding.
am a blank page. I am a blank page. No, because it depends upon what the client wants to do, if they want to leverage their
Mhm.
book or not. The secret is
Okay.
they now have the sort of North Star to leverage that book. they now know what their content is about and what their content should be about. And they can obviously use it to leverage speeches, appearances, elevator pitches, that sort of stuff.
True.
So I guess in that way it's helpful. But my job is just to get you to the starting line, because 99.99% of people aren't at the starting line.
Right.
I get you there, and I get you there with that story in tow. So you're ready to go. What you do with that kite after I hand it to you is depends on how hard you want to run.
Yeah, that's for sure. And that makes sense. Yeah, I think you have to know where you want to go before you can set the plan to get there. So,
Oh yeah, I know what I know about marketing a book. You could put in the head of a pin.
gotcha. Well, I know you at least can start getting on podcasts. I know a lot of people do that. So that's a good way to get it out there.
And yeah, and I got to tell you how much fun this has been. I so appreciate you having me on. It's been really fun. I've learned a lot. I've learned that there's actually a Kokomo, Indiana, for one thing.
Yep.
I
And
didn't know.
I always thought the song was about our city growing up. I'd always listen to it. Going to Florida, I was like, man, they wrote a song about us. This is cool. I was
Like
like, I
it's
don't know
Florida
why people would
summer.
want to come to Kokomo for. I'm leaving for vacation. No one comes to Kokomo. So
Dirty
no.
buggers. No, and I have to ask you, and I know
Yeah.
we're talking about me, but how's your business going? How is the podcasting working for you?
Good. It's been fantastic. As this episode is being recorded, we just released episode 295. So once this one comes out, we'll be past 300.
Wow.
And yeah, it's changed along the way. Adapted, have shifted a little bit, rebranded a little bit along the way, but it's continually, grown. It's brought Elevate. It's what Elevate was created from, and so it's been really good. Been super, blessed and humbled to be, in the top 2% listened to globally.
Good for you. Good for you.
Charted internationally in the top, 30 to top 25, depending on what chart you're looking at, and super blessed, and being able to share and help other people, build their brands and businesses through not only what I speak on my solo episodes, but what fantastic people like you, Mike, share to help them, just elevate what they're doing. So,
I'm wrecking your format, but I have to ask you, and
yeah,
this is kind of a question that sometimes people ask off camera. We can do that off camera. How do you get people? How do you convince people? I don't quite know what the verb is there, but how do you make the person you're speaking with understand that you care about their story and that
mm,
their story is important to you? And because it's important to you, it should be important to them. But because we don't, the thing about human beings is we don't know what we don't know, what we think. If I may just give you an
yeah,
example. When I was a little kid, my dad was kind of a crazy guy. He would take the dog for a walk, but he would put the dog in the car. He would drive the car out to a dirt road. He'd take this little dog and he'd put him outside the car, and then he'd slowly drive away. And the poor dog. And I thought this was normal, right? Because I said, well, my dad did, everybody did that. And this is a little bit of an exaggeration, but when I'd see people later on walking their dogs on a leash, I would say to myself, those poor people can't afford a car. Because that was my norm.
right.
And so the things that are amazing in people, they think is just, not interesting because it's their story. So to go circle around to you, how do you sort of convince that person that what they don't think is important is really, really important and of value to somebody else?
Mm, that's a great question. And I think it comes back to, everyone has a story. I truly believe everyone has a story and has their experiences and their ups and downs for a reason. And I think that alone is enough to share because someone else out there can resonate or can say, yeah, I get it. I've been
Yeah,
there too. Or, hey, wow, they've done, they've been through exactly what I've been through, or they deal with the
right.
same things. And I can learn from them. Or, like you have an expertise in writing books and getting people authored. And like, there are so many people out there who want to know how to do that. Again, kind of like what I mentioned earlier, like if we don't put it out there, we're doing the world a disservice
I so agree.
because the people like there's someone probably listening to this episode right now, Mike, that is going to write a book because of your episode that
Uh,
they wouldn't have done if we didn't have this episode. And
Not great.
that's kind of how I come from that direction when I'm bringing people on. I'm like, what can I learn from them? What can they teach someone else? Because I truly believe I can learn from anyone, and I want to share that with those who are listening because, together we can, elevate so many more people by sharing this out and doing all that. So,
I think, well, that's a great answer. Yeah, I think that's a great answer. It's a great thought, isn't it? That you,
mhm,
You mentioned earlier that I wrote a book that's in pretty well every library, So I have that tangible thing. I can go into a library and find it. It's a little difficult from what you're talking about, but if that person has that book,
Mhm.
on Amazon or whatever it is, it's the same thing. You've inspired that person to write that book, and you go in that Amazon, the world's biggest bookstore, find that
Yep.
tangible token of something you helped somebody else do. That's pretty noble work.
Yeah. And it's fun. I started specifically just interviewing because I wanted to learn, and I knew if I wanted to learn something, someone else is probably wanting to learn the same thing. And now it's grown
Sure.
to I want to continue to learn, but now
Yeah.
I want to share what I've learned personally, and that's why I started doing solo episodes this year. And yeah, I mean, however we can help more people is the ultimate goal, and build something outside of what they're doing now.
Yeah, it's very powerful. As you nailed it. Everybody has a story. It's a bit
Mhm.
of a cliche,
Right.
but we all do because we don't know what we don't know, right?
Yep. Yeah,
You know,
100%.
that is so powerful.
Yeah. So, Mike, it's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed this.
Oh, thank you for having me, Chris. I had such
Yeah.
good fun. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're listening to this right now, and you're thinking about writing a book, if you're thinking about, you know, getting into becoming an author and haven't done it yet, reach out to Mike for sure. Get connect with him, Mike Olmer. Mike, where can people best connect with you if they are looking to get help?
There is actually a MikeOlmer.com, so
Perfect.
that's probably a great place to start.
Awesome. Yeah. So guys, get connected with him. Take that step. I know I will down the road once it's the right time for me. But yeah. And if you're listening to this and you know someone who's talked about starting a book or just are interested in becoming an author, share this with them. That way, again, we can, you know, extend that ripple out of helping people elevate their lives and brands. But until next time, again, Mike, thanks so much for being on the
Oh,
Elevate Media podcast.
thank you for having me. I was thrilled to do it.
Absolutely.